Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Podcast number 4, I believe, in context. We have a new president in the United States. And I think as far as our concern goes for this podcast, as well as Muslim concerns, the only thing I think we should talk about is the foreign policy. I mean, anything else really is irrelevant, in my opinion. So that's it. I'm going to set that up by just saying, what are your thoughts on the new Trump presidency in a couple months with regard to foreign policy?
I think it's a good idea that we focus on foreign policy, of course, but I think it's also important for our viewers to recognize that domestic decisions will also impact foreign policy, and it will impact Muslims as well. So we should be aware of that just going forward, all right? I just think that's important. But yeah, regarding foreign policy, I mean, it's still too early to tell what exactly is going to happen. So we should all be a little bit, cautious. Despite the fact that Trump does have quite, this body of America firsters, a lot of the names that are showing up already, like Brian Hook, are hardcore neocons, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see, does Trump go a more neoconservative, aggressive foreign policy, or is it going to be more of the hands-off J.D. Vance kind of America first-ism? And to be perfectly honest, I just can't see U.S. foreign policy actually fully detaching itself from the world. There's too much power, too much leverage to be had, that when push comes to shove, the United States is not going to want to renounce its position in the international order. Even someone like Trump recognizes that China will fill that void very quickly, as will other countries that are competitors. And I think the United States probably will continue a similar approach. I think they might pull out a few troops from the Middle East. They might restation some people. Yeah, you'll see some tariffs and some other sort of squabbles between the United States and its EU, NATO partners. But in the end, I can't see America becoming a truly isolationist country. That's my initial take on it, but I'd like to hear yours as well.
The debate about whether the U.S. is going to be isolationist or engage in foreign policy has been done by the end of World War II. The establishment point of view is there is a lot more to be had by engaging in an active colonial foreign policy than to isolate the U.S. from the world. Occasionally, Republican politicians will raise the isolationism as a stick on their partners in the colonial Western alliance to get Europe to bear what they call their fair share in the alliance duties, military and economic spending, and it's called economic assistance and the like. But for all intents and purposes, the U.S. is not going to leave the world alone. What I'd like to start addressing now, once we go to the specifics, is why did Trump win from a foreign policy perspective? So I didn't foresee it personally, and I didn't foresee it because I was going on the rational actor economic perspective, which is, well, the economy is in great shape. Now, apologists for the U.S. public opinion will go and say, well, but the prices were high, and because the prices were high, people were scared of high prices. That is, in my opinion, apology, meaning they have an ugly reality that they don't want to face. Truth is, this is the best economy in the world. Nobody else has it as good as the U.S. And the prices they are talking about has gone down. Economists talk about, stickiness, meaning people's perception of high prices are actually in delay. So they reflect the last 2 years. That's true. On the other hand, the last 2 years of Trump government were complete chaos. You had the pandemic. So in my opinion, what was at play there is just plain and simple greed. It is always true that the greedy will fall for the most outrageous con artist who promises them the skies for nothing. Trump promised the public opinion in the US that he is going to hold the world at ransom, and he is going to gain more out of it and give it away to the general population in the US. He said that when he said, I'll impose tariffs all over the world, I'll impose tariffs on the Chinese, I'll impose tariffs on the Mexicans. This to US public opinion sounds like we're going to get money out of others. Now, I don't think he's truthful about this. He is just, stacking good politics because he understands the greedy people and he's a very good con artist. I keep remembering Stephen Wall's very good description of Trump as a gifted con artist. So he understands his population well, and he understands that greed will get them to his side. But actually, I don't believe his tariffs smear. I mean, eventually, this is just a starting position of, well, I'm going to hold you all to ransom. What are you going to give me in return? He conducts foreign policy like a street hustler, which, in my opinion, is a very bad way of doing foreign policy, but he doesn't think so. So that's his starting position, and that appealed to his population. There is another factor that also related to foreign policy, which is I'm going to end all wars.
Yeah.
This is actually a lie. His track record says it's a lie. So yes, Trump promised to pull the U.S. out of Afghanistan, but he never did it. It was Biden who did it, because Trump was not willing to pay the price, political price, take the political hit for withdrawing from Afghanistan. Trump promised to withdraw from Syria, but he never did it, and Biden never did it. Trump never did it because his establishment raised issues, and actually his generals were quite explicit after he left that we obstructed it. Okay, Biden didn't mind because he thought that there is good reasons for the U.S. to continue to occupy Syria. So the truth is, Trump never ended any wars, and he doesn't mind starting wars. But the issue for him is this is a con artist who wants to hold the world to ransom and wants to make demands. Now, the population liked what they heard. And that's why Trump won across the US. The old argument that the apologists in the media kept making that, well, poor whites were voting for Trump because they are afraid of economic upheavals, has been given the lie in this election because his support is across the board. By the way, last time around, also I know very well the Midwest. Looking closely at the Midwest, I figured out that wasn't true because actually he was getting more support in the more prosperous parts than the less prosperous parts. Like if you know Ohio well, you know that Eastern Ohio is not as prosperous as Western Ohio.
True.
And Western Ohio was more supportive for Trump in 2016 than Eastern Ohio.
Well, in my opinion, I think Kamala Harris was an incredibly weak candidate. I think that foreign policy probably played very little role in this election. Cost her a few thousand votes, maybe even up 10,000, something around there, maybe in a state like Michigan. But she still lost by a lot more than that. If you look at the voter data, her margins were down across the entire state, not just in the Muslim areas. And I guarantee you, none of those people in northern Michigan voted for Trump out of anger over Gaza. Okay,
No.
The upper peninsula, I mean.
Foreign policy accounted for 3 or 4% of the population's main concern in exit polls. So this myth has to be dispelled. Like the idea that Muslims turned this election is wrong, and we can't fool ourselves into thinking that. Yes, we helped run up the margin a little bit for Trump. There's no denying that. But in the end, this election did not hinge on Gaza. And we have to also remember that if she would have taken a more pro-Gaza position, she would have lost a lot of pro-Israel votes. So it would have canceled itself out either. I mean, people just don't talk about this, and I don't understand. It's like, if she really took a strong pro-Gaza vote position, do you think that wouldn't have cost her votes on the other hand? It was sort of so in the end, I think foreign policy didn't matter that much, and even if she took a different position, it would have canceled out. In reality, people didn't like Kamala Harris. She did not actually win the primary. My family members who are pro-Trump hate her. They thought she was obnoxious. They thought she was arrogant. They thought she was out of touch. They saw her as a Hillary Clinton 2.0. And they weren't voting for her. And I'm sorry, but there's a lot of men in this country, especially Hispanic men and black men and Arab men, who are not going to vote for a woman named Kamala that's half Indian and half black. It's just, I really believe that. There's a lot of men who are low information voters who aren't going to vote for that, regardless of what the policies are. And I think all of these factors ultimately played into the result we saw. I don't think a lot of these people are I don't think it's a hero worship of Trump vote here. Yes, he does have his cult followers, but I don't think this quote unquote mandate is as strong as people think it is. If the votes are coming in still from California, the difference between Harris and Trump nationally is going to get closer and closer. So I think in the end, it was just a very unpopular and poorly run campaign. They didn't start stakeout positions. They tried too hard to appeal to people like the Cheneys and other neocons, and they made a very foolish overall strategic decision. So I think that these are the reasons why. And yeah, the inflation is very high, and people see that, and it's going down. And the economy is actually doing very well right now. That's the part that's like really interesting for me as somebody who studies data and as a political scientist. Is the economy is doing quite well, all things considered. Biden has dropped inflation dramatically. The unemployment levels are very low still, but inflation hasn't come down enough. And people, as you said, somebody promises us something better, and then they're going to go for it. And I think that really is it. In the end, it was about the economy. It was about perceptions of the economy. It wasn't about the economy. It was about perceptions of the economy. And perception and reality, as Plato reminds us, aren't always the same.
I'd like to make two comments. The first, I think that Harris' campaign had an explicit calculation that trying to sell hot air to Muslims is going to be more damaging than it's going to win votes.
I agree.
Explicit. That's why she spat on Muslims in Detroit 3 times at least. She explicitly spat on them, went out of her way to spit on them, which to my mind indicates an internal calculation that anything you're going to win by trying to give them false promises is going to produce even more negative results among the general population. So the general population is colonial, and if it feels that you're trying to carry favor with the colonized, you will be punished. She doesn't need to make these promises. On the other hand, Trump's promises in the last 2 weeks of I'm going to end the wars are actually very interesting. I think they show that the democratic government calculation that it can have its pie and eat it, or have its cake and eat it, are wrong. So the democratic government has, for the last year, labored under the assumption that we can have our massacre in Gaza, we can kill as much as we want, we can punish the colonized and show them their place, and then assign the blame on this to Israel by saying, we disapprove.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the end, if we want to understand politics going forward, we have to understand that the Democratic Party has sort of run out of ideas. And running on "we're not Trump" is not going to work. And running on a foreign policy agenda that is more interventionist than at least what Trump is portraying is very problematic, I think. I think all Americans are sick of these unending wars. I think no American wants to send their child off to somewhere in the Middle East, a country they can't pronounce, to fight on behalf of people that they don't like anyways, in defense of whatever values are being told that they're defending. And I think that I really do think Trump will probably try to avoid sending troops to places. Doesn't mean he's going to avoid using ballistic missiles and other types of offensive attacks when necessary. I do believe that will continue. But I don't see Trump sending thousands of troops into the Middle East unless something changes. And then again, with Trump being so unpredictable, if something bruises his ego, who knows? Maybe he'll launch an all-out nuclear war. I mean, this is the issue with the sort of not so rational actor that seems to have taken hold.
I disagree on considering him irrational. So typically,
I think he's rational, but I think he's also very emotional. And emotion and irrationality don't always work together.
Look, the idea that there is an irrational actor is typically held by the colonialists to justify their image of the colonized as less than human and thus irrational. In this case, it's being held against Trump because he is not irrational, but he operates according to different assumptions than the established assumptions of what is considered responsible political behavior.
I mean, I don't think he's irrational as in he's like crazy and unable to balance, decisions and make reasonable decisions. I think he's irrational in the sense that, as you said, he doesn't have a clear, coherent policy. So you're going to see a lot of conflicting decisions. And that is sort of type of irrationality, is it not? To do things that go against what will get you to your goal is not rational by definition. by definition, if you go a circular route to a path instead of a straight line, that's an irrational decision, right? So I think that when you see so many contradictions and look, when you stand for nothing, which Trump sort of has shown he doesn't really stand for much anything,
Yes.
that means you'll fall for anything, right? I read this on the back of a milk carton once as a kid. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And that sort of is where we're at right now. I just don't
So
know exactly what we're going to see. Other actors' behavior in the region, whether it's Iran or Iraq or whoever else, is going to also play a role in shaping what happens over these next 4 years.
to my mind, Trump operates in international politics as a con artist. The con artist he is just a real estate con artist. That is a very different perspective from the established perspective of international policy. International policy has theories about and established consensus about what are the existing long-term interests of the US and what are the existing long-term interests of other players, and how can the US maximize its resources to maximize the use of its resources to achieve the largest possible amount of interest out of the resources it has, which is standard formal approach to foreign policy. Trump, on the other hand, talks about deals and stuff, and I'm going to hold these to ransom and those to ransom. And actually, the problem with this from a foreign policy perspective is your most important asset in foreign policy as an organizing force of the market, as the dominant state in international order, is your credibility and predictability. And predictability is very important to credibility. On the other hand, if you want to make deals, predictability is harmful. You want to gain the most out of your nemesis in the deal, the other party. So you have to be unpredictable. So that's where the play comes. Trump is not concerned about maintaining his credibility or predictability. Actually, Biden spent the last 4 years to repair the damage caused to U.S. international standing by the unpredictability of Trump. Now we are back at the start because Trump has a track record, and that track record just comes automatically into the foreign policy calculations. So this is probably worse position than 2016 because Trump doesn't start at the gate in this case. He doesn't start from zero. He starts from a significantly negative position. And this is negative position not with respect to the colonized who cannot do much to the U.S. interests. It's negative position with respect to the other important power centers in the world who perceive him as unpredictable, thus does not have credibility. I think that's what you're trying to point at, right, Joseph?
Yeah, so basically what I think is going to happen is, all right, think of an example. I like to use biology examples once in a while. If you have a small heart attack and it doesn't kill you, the veins grow around and you have other routes to transport the blood. So the heart will literally avoid that artery and create new ones. So take that analogy. If Trump is sort of like a blockage in the international system, other actors will create alternative routes around Trump and around the United States. So EU isn't going to just roll over and die. They're not going to just give it to Putin. They're going to create other alliances and other organizations. They're going to do things around the United States to avoid the United States. And other actors are going to create their own sort of alternative arteries to avoid dealing with U.S. dollar and other U.S. And this could very much weaken the U.S. position. Because as you made the point, the strength in the United States has been the liberal international order for the last 70 years because the United States dominates these institutions, such as NATO and the UN. And if the United States backs out of these, the United States loses an enormous amount of influence, direct influence it has over other global actors. So this is where the whole isolationist unpredictability wild card thing can backfire. Is the Germans and other powerful EU states will say, just, okay, let's ignore the Americans and let's figure out our own alternative strategy, our own BRICS, or whatever you want to call it, right? And if enough countries do that, that's going to really literally isolate the United States, who, let's be honest, is located on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, right? All the action, so to speak, is happening over here where I'm at, in Europe and in North Africa and in Asia. Geographically, the United States is literally on the other side of the world. And it's going to be more isolated than ever if it loses its ability to control through proxy organizations that it basically funds and runs. As somebody pointed out to Trump, who didn't really get it, that the United States funds NATO because NATO is in the United States' interests, more so than perhaps any other actor. Because NATO is what maintains the United States' absolute hegemony. It just provides protection for other European actors, but it provides the United States its full cover of dominance.
It
So if
allows the
NATO,
US. It allows the US to dominate Europe.
yes, and if NATO is weakened, then the U.S.'s position is weakened. And with this, and remember, Trump has boxed himself in because he's America first. So if he unilaterally uses American power abroad, that violates what his voters voted for. So he weakens the overall institutions that give the American its hegemony, and he puts himself in a position where he can't even use the military force to its full capacity because that'll upset the people that voted for him as an isolationist candidate. So both of these factors could potentially really weaken the United States in the long term.
Just a historical note: it has been a long-standing policy of Republican presidents since Reagan and Bush the Elder to use isolationism as a stick to get the U.S. way in international forums. They have done that repeatedly in the UN through withholding funding to different organizations, threatening to withdraw from different treaties and organizations if they don't get their way. So this is an established stick in the U.S. foreign policy. One last issue I'd like to address today is the concept of deep state. Trump keeps, and his sphere, his cult, keep talking about the deep state opposing him, the deep state wanting him to fail, and the deep state wanting this, and the deep state wanting that. Some in colonized media, especially in Arab media, are enamored with this concept of deep state. In my mind, there is no such thing as a deep state. There is no criminal organization that meets at night and decides we're going to do bad things to Trump. This is nonsense. The truth is, Trump and his acolytes keep talking about deep state to throw their failures on it, to claim that, well, these people are plotting against us, that's why he's failing. There is indeed an establishment, but the establishment represents the consensus opinion of existing organizations that represent the powerful and power interests in the US, whether it's economic or political. There is a Republican Party establishment, there is a Democratic Party establishment, there is a foreign policy establishment, and the foreign policy establishment, like the Council of Foreign Affairs, represents a bipartisan consensus, not even party. Okay. Now, there is a disagreement in the establishment as a whole does not appreciate Trump. Even the Republican Party establishment does not like Trump because they don't like the fact that he undermines the credibility of the US. And they also don't like his violation of the official norms. There is a norm for official behavior in Western politics. And the norm says that while you're in office, you take care of the consensus interests and you put that ahead of anything else. Once you leave office, the powerful will reward you for taking care of their affairs, either by just explicitly rewarding you with seats on different corporations boards that just pay you hundreds of thousands of dollars for attending 4 meetings a year, or actually you can sell your services and how to manage the process to secure your interests through various consulting companies. So there is an official norm for how do you make use of your office in Western political circles. Trump violates this norm on 2 levels. The first level is he tries to gain personal interest while still in office. Like he tries to take care of his family business through his official functions, like sending U.S. government business to his own companies, which is frowned upon. This violates the official morality. He also sacrifices policy interests for his own image. Like he likes to make a show, and sometimes that undermines U.S. politics, and this is frowned upon as well. So, for example, in Afghanistan, he wasn't willing to take the hit to achieve the important political goal of withdrawing so that you do not help China expand. and you do not help perpetuate the existing problem in the subcontinent. There is calculation that we can discuss later about that. But this was a U.S. interest, and he wouldn't do it because he is more concerned about his image than achieving the important state interests. So both of these make both sides of the establishment disapprove of him. However, the Republican side of the establishment is willing to absorb this disapproval about morality in the interest of winning elections, which is normal. This is standard Machiavellian politics. So that is not a deep state. This is a rational process in a corrupt political process.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole deep state talk is just conspiracy theory talk. I don't buy it. I never have bought it. I think that Washington has always been a place of favors and circles of going from being a senator to being a consultant to being shareholder of a major defense contractor and back and forth. This is what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. This has been the way it's always been, and the whole point of a bureaucracy is to basically serve as what we call institutional memory, and it's meant to keep the state stable. It doesn't matter who the president is; the bureaucracy should still function. And the fact that you have certain bureaucrats that have lived through 4 or 5 different presidents is very important to the stability and the overall robustness of the system. And if Trump does want to go through with this Schedule F and reshape the whole federal bureaucracy to basically be a bunch of loyalists, that's very bad long term. And it's going to just lead to more confusion and slowness in the bureaucracy than anything else. So I that's sort of all I have to say about that. I think that this is the biggest thing to look at domestically, though, in the long term, is how Trump will reshape the federal bureaucracy. And that the implications of that really can't be understated nor fully understood until later.
I doubt he will go through with this because this runs against the fundamental foundational interests in the state. So he threatens things and he makes outrageous stands to see how much the most he can gain.
How about this talk that, like, Israel, even a week before the election was confirmed and he won, was hinting, and then afterwards they're saying this now. We're happy he won. We wanted him to win. Is this just because Biden gave him everything he wanted? Why would they go out of the way to say, no, we want Trump to win? It's in our best interest if he wins, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I mean, I think, Israel and Trump have had a very strong relationship. I think that they see that they can get more out of Trump than Biden, even though Biden's given them pretty much everything they've wanted. The more extreme expansionist elements, full annexation of Gaza, for example, whatever, rebuilding the third temple potentially, become more realistic under a Trump administration than a Biden administration. And I think to understand Israeli policy, it really is driven by this messianic desire to rebuild that third temple. And it sounds, crazy to say that, but it really is the truth. Like, anybody who's ever been around Orthodox Jewish people know this is like a part of the daily prayers they have, is to pray for the rebuilding of this temple. This isn't just a bluster. This isn't just some kind of fringe position. This is the ultimate goal and desire of the whole state of Israel, is to rebuild the third temple so they can resume ritualistic worship practices. So that's something that they want, that Biden probably wouldn't roll over and give them, but Trump is more likely to be amenable to something more along those lines. So of course they would prefer him in power.
I wouldn't think. Go ahead, Joseph.
I think that's what it ultimately, at the highest levels of the 9-dimensional chess game being played, that's the I think ultimate calculation is Trump will give them more ability to do the most extreme elements of their ultimate agenda.
So I don't think Trump would ever allow them to implement the ejection of people from Palestinians from the West Bank or Gaza. Not because he likes them, but because he likes his colonies. Israel is not particularly interested in Gaza as much as it's interested in the West Bank, because that's where the money and resources and agriculture and water is. If Israel tries to implement anything like that in the West Bank, it will strongly destabilize Jordan, might bring down the English king of Jordan, and that is quite harmful to the U.S. colonial occupation of Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
So It isn't that the US likes us, it is that it likes its colonies and its interests. These colonies and interests continue to exist whether the administration is Republican or Democratic. And as much as Trump doesn't care about scraps going to the Israelis, he cares about his core interests. So I don't see him doing that. Actually, he would be more effective at stopping it. Tactically, actually, Trump is, internationally speaking, is in a weaker position in the Middle East than Biden, because Trump is explicitly pro-Israel. That makes it harder for him to block other actors from interfering. The US has been holding the line under Biden administration that nobody needs to interfere because we are impartial, we are engaged, and we are on the job to stop the war. Trump is not in this business. And even if he pretends to be in his business, he doesn't have the credibility for it. So tactically, actually, this opens opportunities for quote-unquote enterprising powers to try to meddle around with their interests, of course.
All right, Shabab. I think we're done for today.
Okay.